discovered that the average person who's watching videos actually watches them for like 13 seconds. So I don't know how to read how many people are watching these, but you know, the news cycle is just violent right now with its coverage of what's happening with immigration. But I want to say something, which is, this is a broadcast now particularly for believers, because I think that what's happening in America is a spiritual battle that needs to be understood and delivered from its complexity. What has happened is the Attorney General's, the internal report that came out this week has exposed the absolute complicity and intentionality of deep state, FBI, Department of Justice collusion in order to thwart Trump's candidacy, to embed people into, this wasn't in the report, this comes out around the report, to embed people into his campaign in order to literally offer money in order to set up and entrap people in the campaign. And then you have the Peter Strzok and his girlfriend's text, plus 2 other unidentified agents who are all part of the FBI cabal in order to thwart Trump once he comes into office by finding a stumbling block or some way to undo the will of the American people by pulling out. All of that information is now public. And so what the Democrats have to do, and understand, the media is the Democratic Party. People merely make a mistake. If you don't get this down, you'll be deceived for the rest of your life. The Democratic Party is the media, and the media is the Democratic Party. So what they do is they have to figure out how to take this disastrous narrative of Trump meeting with Kim Jong-il, of the economy roaring into a 3.3 to potentially 4% GDP, of Trump fighting for America on trade, and the optimism of America. They have to find something of incendiary quality that has the voltage necessary to emotionally capture the narrative, and they find it with the pictures of Obama-era policies. This is the amazing and shocking thing that is being brought out. Obama's policies that were being enacted in order to do something with the immigration was to not allow the children to come in separately, to be able to go over the border. And so they have these pictures that are being used from the Obama era, and they're all over. Now they're being taken down all over the place because they've served their purpose. The left wants to say Republicans hate children. Republicans hate children. Now the reality is the Democrats could care less about the welfare of children. All of this heart-rending language about children being separated from their parents, children being pried from their mothers. There are 1 million abortions being done every month in America because the Democrats' policy is to separate children from their mother's womb for profit. They abort them. 22% of American pregnancies, apart from miscarriages, are actually ending in abortion. It's a shocking statistic. 22% of pregnancies end in abortion. And it's the Democratic Planned Parenthood machinery that makes a profit off of the issue in terms of running candidates and in terms of its money-making machine. And so the reality is there's no concern for children. What the Democrats want is, you see, they've lost something with middlemen. Trump did something brilliant. He went actually into the Democratic Rust Belt areas and got votes. He got votes from people that were tired of being marginalized and ignored in the left crusade of whipping up every minority they could find. See, what the devil does is he is now amassing every minority grievance group that he could possibly find and cobbling together a coalition of angry people. If Trump wants to make America great again, what the devil wants to do is make America hate again. And the hatred towards Trump is so rabid, so inexcusable. From De Niro's F-bomb rant with a standing ovation in Hollywood. You talk about the 7 mountains of culture. Hollywood is manifesting demons right now. The media is frothing. It's like, anything that Trump does, he's like a guy with a pork chop wrapped around his neck thrown into a den of Rottweilers. They just devour him. And now watch what's going to happen. He's responding to the angst of the Obama policies that have created a conundrum on the border because the Democrats want 20 million votes. They want 20 million votes. They can't find them. So they want to collapse the borders. They're not doing this for America. They're doing this for power. It's the lust for power And it's not even a concern about America. It's not a concern about a $22 trillion deficit that we could break at any moment. There's so many awakened Christians understood that America's financial situation is such that we could have gone down like the Titanic under Hillary, and God intervened. But now the combined malice, the rage, and the manipulation of all the major networks, 98% of their coverage on Stormy Daniels up until they found something else. What happened to Stormy? What happened to Porny Stormy? She's gone. And her lawyer, where's he? He had 150 appearances on TV. Where's he? Well, she's doing some strip club in New Jersey right now. That's it. She's out. You know what's hot? It's going to be, they want a blue wave and they want to stir up the angst. They want the Hitler narrative. And this is all stuff that Trump inherited, just like Korea. He inherited the mess from politicians. And listen, the Republicans are no better than the Democrats. Lest anyone think that I'm just so pro-Republican. I'm pro-righteous, and we got one shot to get this thing right. So you got the Republicans that have big donors. What did they hate about Donald Trump? He doesn't owe anything to anyone. The guy's working without a salary. He's doing this. His family's threatened. Barron was threatened. Talk about the nitwit insanity of people. Peter Fonda, who hasn't had a hit since Easy Rider or something in the 1960s, Peter Fonda writes this stupid tweet, and it says that he would like to see Barron plucked from Melania's arms and shoved in a cage with a pedophile. This is the kind of demonic material. I want to see whether Twitter blocks his account. Let's all see. We'll start a hashtag block Peter Fonda, because they're blocking Christians. They're blocking conservatives. I want to see if they do this thing with rabid crazy people that are out there in Hollywood smoking too much weed and frustrated over their failed careers probably. So here's the deal. This is an epic moment when Trump is feeling, I mean, it's a concert. I got a call today from people in Washington, and it's like Christians. And they're going, Lance, the optics on this are pretty bad. This thing with Trump and the border is pretty bad. The optics, what we should be doing is having an echo chamber that pushes back and says there's a vast majority of Americans that actually want to see immigration reform. The Republicans are not doing their job because they owe money to donors who want cheap labor. How corrupt is that? They don't want to move aggressively because they want the cheap labor coming in. Who's going to suffer with all that cheap labor, by the way? It's going to be the middle class and the poor. Trump has reversed now, for the first time in American history, the unemployment statistics with the African-American community, with the Hispanic community. Across the board, employment is there. What do the Democrats want to do? They're not getting the votes. They want to flood America, and they don't even want to flood them properly. We have ports where people can come in. We have 3 points of entrance you can come into America. And they're not using those 3 points. They're organizing, literally, they are funded leftist machines running caravans with camera people waiting to create the optics to manipulate the American mind. Now, the reason why this is important for Christians to get is the fact that separating children from their parents is exactly what the strategy is for the immigration policy. You see, parents ship their kids off on buses and trucks and flatbed trains, and they send them, they separate their children and send them on this mission because it's funded by the left in order to create a groundswell of policy change to get their 20 million votes. By the way, the parents that are here illegally, that have children being united with them, the parents chose to separate. The parents chose to separate themselves from their children to get here illegally, and the parents choose to separate themselves from their children to send them here illegally. The only real separation that we really have right now is the separation of policy in terms of how to protect America from having the wrong people come in and flood the borders. But the president can't solve this problem because there's no willingness on the Republican side to stand with them on building a wall and a proper process, or the Democrat side, because the Democrats have been offered solutions. They don't want it. They want to ride the media hysteria. They found their mythical blue wave. They found it. Well, what's worse is the manipulation of public sentiment. So, having got that out of my system, I got to let you know this is not new. Here's the interesting part. You are now entering Reformation. Reformation is when the seething masses, like the ocean, the Bible refers to in the book of Revelation as the waves, and with the waves in the Bible that are foaming and disrupted, it refers to populist movements. Now, what happened in Europe? Merkel is in trouble right now. Merkel's holding on by a thread. You know why? Because she allowed the immigration wall to collapse, brought in 1 million immigrants, and now she is in danger because it's destroying Germany. It's destroying Europe. The populist people are basically saying, what the heck are you doing? Because this policy of indiscriminate immigration by fiat, by force, by manipulation, and by decree, rather than by a process with a strategy, is destroying Europe. And that's causing the populist pushback right now. Because to a great degree, the Muslim community is the hardest community to assimilate. Unless you're coming in because of persecution, unless you're coming in because you're fleeing a situation, there should be a filter up as to who comes into your country and whether or not they add to the value and the prosperity and the flourishing and the coherence of your culture and of your national identity. This is kind of like common sense 101, but the left doesn't want it because the left loves the power. The power, my friends. You got that? So here's what I want to say. I want to say this whole debacle that Trump is under pressure on right now, that Melania Trump had to notify the FBI about threats about her child Barron being taken, from her. A typical mother hearing this kind of stuff, it's insanity. But does the left ever get held to account for its rage, for its obscenity, for its vulgar, vile, destructive, violent stirring up of hatred and anger? Why do you think 40 Republicans aren't running again for elected office? I'll tell you why. I've talked to them. Because their families, their children, and their lives are under too much hostile pressure from the leftists that are out to get power. And that's exactly what you need to know. Now, it's not new. Here's the part that ought to encourage you. This is what happens. Believe it or not, as the kingdom of God advances, it puts pressure on all the structures that are there, and it brings to the surface the real hidden agendas that are inside people's hearts. I want you to grab your Bible. Mark 4, Jesus is being quoted a lot by liberals. They always love to quote Jesus out of context when it serves their purpose. Jesus says, suffer the little children to come unto me. And so therefore they're saying, suffer the little children to come unto Jesus in America. And it's a classic torturing out of context what Jesus was teaching. So in Matthew, here's a verse you can take. Mark chapter 4, verse 24. Take heed what you hear. Because the average Christian is sitting there drinking in CNN, MSNBC, and listening to sounds, doesn't even have, and the church, God bless us. When was the last time your pastor ever talked to you and gave you a compassionate understanding of biblical immigration policy, how to welcome in and bring people that need refuge into your community and take care of them? You haven't heard that sermon because it's too politically motivated. So you got a whole bunch of stuff on favor, blessing, end time blessing, first fruits, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, America is not going to have any fruits left to give you if the Christians don't wake up. So you got Mark chapter 4, verse 24. Jesus says, take heed how you hear. Luke chapter 8 says something interesting. Jesus says, take heed what you hear. A lot of you, unless you're getting a steady, balanced diet, and you're going to specific blog sources, like unless you're listening to a Ben Shapiro and reading that young guy's mind on this stuff, unless you're dialed in on the real story of white privilege and stuff from the papers of Jordan Peterson, unless you get a hold of the intelligent briefings that come from a Mark Levine or a Rush, then you can't afford to expose yourself indiscriminately to drive-by media, because the drive-by media is the manipulative propaganda organ of a spirit of mind control. There's one for my friends on the right-wing watch. You can quote me on that one. Only quoted accurately for a change. So Acts chapter 7. Let me give you some Book of Acts revelation on what's happening in America right now, and why, in essence, while it's bad news, it's good news. It's good news because what's happening now is we're finally getting somewhere. We're finally getting to the point where things are heating up, and they're heating up to the point where people have to become literate and informed spiritually on what they're going to do. And God help us if we keep having knucklehead pastors out there that are doing talking points for the left, because Soros and the left already made a decision. They had a major meeting with the dysfunctional leftist evangelicals. Oh yeah, we got leftist evangelicals, and they can't wait. Get this, their mission is to reclaim Jesus. They feel that Jesus has been taken over by interceding Donald Trump, SageCon, spiritually active, governmentally engaged conservatives. They want to reclaim Jesus, so they got a massive reclaim Jesus. You watch, it's going to heat up till November, and it's not reclaiming Jesus. It's torturing the name of Jesus out of context to serve leftist and Marxist agendas. So anyway, so here you go. You start with Acts chapter 13, and I'm just reading what happens with the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul is going along, and he's preaching in a synagogue, and almost the whole city comes together to hear the word of God. And this manipulation of the masses, this manipulation of the minds and hearts of people is as old as the first century church. Verse 45, it says, and when the Jews saw the multitudes, when the Jews saw all of the Trump supporters, they were filled with envy and spoke against those things which were spoken by Paul, contradicting and blaspheming. And I'm not talking about Jews here because Paul was Jewish. I'm talking about political opposition to God's activity. They were moved with envy when they saw the multitudes. Why? Because it was disenfranchising their power. The quest for power is as old as the Bible itself. And so they were filled with envy. And what are you going to do with Trump when he's coming back from what Obama could never do and Bush could never do, a meeting with North Korea? When he comes and turns the economy around into growth areas that the left could never have done and Bush didn't do and Obama didn't do. When he is literally optimism in America and the Gallup poll is on the rise. What do? Moved with envy, they try to find some fictitious Hitler thing they could put on a righteous man. And so they began to speak against and contradict and blaspheme everything that was being spoken of by the apostles. And that's what you got in media today. Contradictions, blasphemy, and speaking against. CNN, MSNBC, ABC, Chuck Todd, and all the other nuts. Then Paul and Barnabas, thank God, they waxed bold. They waxed bold. That's the key word for Christians right now. It's not like, well, Lance, you don't want to get involved with strife. Even prophecies are out right now. I'm reading prophecies. Don't get involved with any controversies for the next couple of months. The next couple of months is the midterms. What kind of knucklehead prophet advice is that? Go silent, go mute. We're already hiding like ostriches with our head in the sand. And now we got to be warned spiritually about not sticking our heads out? Mamma mia. Anyway, so we got Paul sitting there, and he basically sees that the Jews, and look at this, verse 50. The Jews stirred up the devout and honorable women and the chief men of the city and expelled them. So they're going for the CEOs and the professors and the journalists, and they're going for the entertainers. They're going for the devout, religious, pious, liberal evangelicals, and they want to get as many, and they can succeed. The devil can succeed in raising up an honorable opposition as well as a riffraff opposition. That's when you know you got a good reformation happening. Let's keep going. I want you to see what happens when the book of Acts is taking place. Acts chapter 4. Paul takes off at 14. He takes off after that and he comes to Iconium. He goes into a synagogue where there's a great multitude of Jews and also Greeks. But the unbelieving Jews, the liberal Democrats, stirred up all of the nation, and they affected and infected their minds against the messengers. They infected their minds. Do you see this? This is what the power, this is like when we talk about Leviathan. When we're talking about Leviathan, we're talking about a high-level spirit that orchestrates the venomous distortion of truth in order to smear good people with the propaganda that immobilizes their effectiveness to do good. So, fortunately, the Apostle Paul would not back down. So a long time, therefore, he stayed there speaking boldly and testified to the word of God. And God granted signs and wonders. You Christians want to see signs and wonders? Start taking a stand for the truth on stuff and praying for God to show up. Be interesting to see what actually happens. So Acts chapter 14, verse 19 is interesting too. So they take off from there, and they come to Antioch. And then there were certain political adversaries that come to Antioch and Iconium who persuaded the people, and they physically did violence, like Peter Fonda once. And they literally stoned Paul and dragged him out for dead out of the city. Evidently, Paul didn't have bodyguards like we need nowadays. So he gets dragged out of the city, but evidently God wasn't finished with him. The disciples get around him, they draw a circle, and he gets resurrected from the dead. Some people think that his revelations that he had of what goes on in third heaven came when he was out of his body, in this very verse right here. But let's keep going, man. This is when Paul talks about his afflictions and battles. You all think that, it was somehow, I don't think we understand. It was a political manipulation of the masses in order to thwart his message. That's what it was. Just like the religious spirit that's working on the left today. It's a religious spirit. They're a holy priesthood with their holy sacraments and a holy agenda. And it's the same religious spirit operating through the radical left. It was operating through the unbelieving Pharisees that were fighting Paul. So then we got this verse here, which is kind of interesting. And as Paul and his people were working there in Acts chapter 17, we have Paul goes in verse 4. Some of the devout Jews believed, and of the multitude, not a few, as he's in this next location, which is Thessalonica. But the Jews which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain, I love this language in the King James, lewd fellows of the baser sort. Lewd fellows of the baser sort. And they gathered a company and set all the city in an uproar. What does it mean, lewd fellows of the baser sort? Well, NIV says they went into the marketplace and they hired troublemakers. They went into the marketplace. This is how the left organizes its groups. All of its multitudinous groups, from Antifa onto the other ones, they hire them. These are the troublemakers that are able to be hired in the marketplace, and they set the city in an uproar. I want you to think about this. The word here that is used for stirring up the minds or agitating the minds is the word epigeran. Epigeran. It means to excite, stimulate, agitate to a manifestation. It refers to taking a glass of water and stirring it until the waves are flipping around and the water splits over. This is what the enemy does. He gets into your head. He manipulates the news cycle. The left had to break up the news cycle. These are Obama's pictures they're using from Obama's policies, and suddenly Trump is the Hitler. And Trump is merely dealing with the problem like Korea. He's got to solve it, but he can't get the support that he needs. So we know that, now this is an interesting verse. What do you think it was that really motivates this spirit of attack and assault? Matthew 27, verse 18. I'll give it to you right from the chapter in Jesus' own crucifixion. Pilate is sitting there watching what's going on. He's a politician from Rome, and he could read in verse 18 of chapter 27 of Matthew. It was envy. It was political envy that motivated the Jews to set him up for this trial. And he knew that it was for envy that they had done this thing. And then it says in verse 24, but Pilate saw that rather a riot, a tumult, an uproar was being agitated on the streets, that the people were being so stirred up in the chaos and confusion of this, that it would be easier for him to cave in and give in to what the mob wanted than to stand for justice. And so he sent an innocent man to his death because he feared the multitudes getting out of hand, stirred up by the media mouths that were shouting louder than the group that was supporting him. Because it says that the Pharisees shouted out, and in the uproar they were louder than the other voices. I'll prove it to you. Some of you are saying no, it doesn't say it. Go to Luke 23. Go to Luke 23 and you'll see whose media voice, whose social media feed prevailed, whose broadcast prevailed. This is in the trial of Jesus. Luke 23, verse 23. It says, and they were instant with loud voices, requiring that he be crucified. And the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. What you got now is voices prevailing against the president under siege. There's nobody with guts in the Republican Party that wants to solve this problem. There's nobody that really wants a solution in the Democratic Party. So here's what's happening. I'm going to predict for you exactly what's happening. Donald Trump made an executive order just to try to let people know that he is not against families. He's trying to solve a problem. That executive order, I prophesy, is going to be sued by the left, because the left could care less about solving the problem. They want to embroil Trump in the next chapter of an impeachment scenario. And so there'll be at least 15 lawsuits that'll come against him saying he doesn't have the legal authority, dictator Trump, to have a decree. He can't do a decree. And the reason he can't do a decree is because the 19th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is that massive liberal, hilarious entity that exists out there in the court world that overrules everything that is common sense regarding immigration, they made the decision that you can't have the children and the parents united, that you have to make a decision on just allowing them to come in legally, but they can't legally be united. That's a 19th Circuit Court decision. So Trump's going to have his executive decree challenged, and the can is going to get kicked down to the midterms because the Democrats are salivating that they finally interrupted Trump's historic trip to Korea. They interrupted the booming economy. They interrupted the Wall Street rally. They've interrupted the unemployment victory. They've interrupted the optimism and come up with something that they can get a hold of to stir up ethnic groups and stir up minorities and stir up the liberal press and brand Republicans and Trump. And let me tell you something, that same spirit, and those of you that say, well, I just pray, I think Trump's going to win in 2020. If he doesn't hold his ground in the midterms. Forget about his ability to do anything more in America. It's going to be carved apart. And by the way, if you think, all of you Mike Pence loving evangelicals out there, can't wait for a nice Christian that's never going to get involved with a scandal. If you think that Mike Pence is going to be treated better than Donald Trump, you watch what happens when they start to bore in on his sanctity of marriage platform. Kaboom! It's all over, folks. That's when you start buying real estate in Costa Rica and getting a hold of your solar-powered soybean survive in the basement kit from your favorite television evangelist. Now, I have an opinion on this, as you can imagine. And my opinion is this is forcing Christians to get involved. This is forcing us to get educated. Don't wait for fearless leaders locally to talk about it, because they're trying to calm down people. Pray for peace, pray for peace. Talk about love, talk about Jesus. But you see, the problem is we're not addressing the actual problems in America. And there's a wisdom for these problems. There's solutions to these problems. Now, I want to explain to you why I keep hitting on the left the way I do. Because it's this selfish right that has allowed this problem to exist. But in terms of the lesser of two evils, the left is certainly the greater of the two evils. And I'll tell you why. Because their agenda is nothing short than a fast path to the annihilation of America, as you've noted. I want you to see some in Ephesians chapter 2. The Apostle Paul talks about to the Ephesians, you have be quickened who were dead in trespasses and sins. Talking to the church and saying, you were quickened, you were made alive. When you got born again, you got a new spirit. That the old you, actually a part of you, your memory didn't go. Your brain didn't go. Your hair color is still the same. Your eyes are still the same. You're still the same weight you were before. But something fundamentally shifted. Your spirit got transformed. And the spirit you is the deepest, most powerful part of the human personality. It's the part that God breathes into. And so we become transformed as we allow that new spirit to take over our thinking and our life. So Paul says you were quickened. You were made alive. When he rose from the dead, you rose from the dead. Wherein in time past you walked. Now watch this. This is important, Christian. According to the course of this world. There's a worldly course. According to, and what's the worldly course controlled by? The prince of the power of the air. That's referring to satanic forces that operate in second heaven. In disembodied, actually they're angels that are angelic spirits that have rebelled, that are over the course of this world. It's called the prince of the power of the airways. The media ways, the television ways, the internet ways, and the prince of the power of the air. And here's a powerful statement. That spirit that is now at work in the children of disobedience. In other words, the principalities of the air have to work through people. And they work through people who align with their agenda, their way of thinking. And so what you have is a dangerous alliance. When you have human beings that are plugging in to the power of principalities so that you have what we call the wisdom that is from below, earthly, demonic, and devilish. And this is how communist regimes take over. This is how dictators take over. This is how genocide gets excited, where people are killing other people. And this is a spirit that works in the children of disobedience. Well, who are the children of disobedience? People that reject the gospel, reject Christ, reject biblical values, biblical teaching, and any revelation that can cause them to be accountable for what they say and do. So children of disobedience exist there. Now, what does the Bible say is the solution? Well, the solution to that is revealed clearly, and I'm going to wrap it up here. And this is where we are right now. In 2 Timothy, the Apostle Paul is under arrest. And he's telling Timothy, don't be ashamed of the truth. And don't be ashamed of the gospel. Don't avoid the controversy. But he says, God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind. The sound mind is the word sophronismos in the Greek. It literally means saved brains. You got to take heed what you hear. You have to take heed how you hear. And you may have to drill down on sources like me and others who will give you a biblical, compassionate, balanced worldview on how nation states can arise and be healthy and flourishing, and how mischievous forces aligned with principalities will tear down nation states. Right now, I came back from Tel Aviv. I was in Israel. I've been in Europe, and I'm heading to islands in South America, off the coast of South America, going to South America. And in every place that I'm going, I'm focusing on the alignment of governments for freedom of religion and asking the church to be strong in engaging governmental issues, getting involved with kings and rulers, because your peace comes when you have righteous rulers. You know what's happening with Donald Trump right now is a proverb. In the want of people is the destruction of any prince. We have the worst echo chamber in the world. We have 1,000 bloggers on the left, plus all the media outlets, day and night, bam, 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 talking. We got The View during the day, and it's all this manipulated mind control going on. Where is the Christian echo chamber that can compete with that? We don't have it on Christian TV. I'm sorry. You don't have. You can name your top 5 TV preachers, and tell me when was the last time you heard them deal with one of the top 5 issues America's shaking over right now. The only thing they touch on is finance, and then the only answer is give to the kingdom and God will take care of you. Well, that hardly takes care of reconciling a nation with a deficit that can torpedo the whole economy. So God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind, saved brains. What we need right now is what the Apostle Paul had. When the Apostle Paul was called, and I'll end it here, we got to claim this and pray for this for every one of us. Acts 26, verse 18. This isn't just for preachers. This is for every single Christian. Acts 26, verse 18. The Lord gave a promise to Paul. He said to him, I'm going to deliver you from the people. That's interesting. He's got to be saved from those crazy people. I'm going to deliver you from the Gentiles, unto whom now I send you. God's sending him, get this, to people that need to hear him in the midst of people who are dangerous. He's being sent to people who he needs to be delivered from. Think about that. In order to get those that are open. And what's his mandate? To open their eyes, to turn them from darkness to light. Notice there's only 2 frequencies here, darkness and light. There's not 1,000 shades of gray here going on. It's darkness to light, and from the power of Satan unto God. There's a time when we need to have journalism, when we need to have broadcasts, we need to have messages that illuminate what does righteousness call for? What is light and what is right? Because what we find out is where it's dark, there's the power of Satan. Where there's a lack of clarity and comprehension, where media is manipulating even Christians' minds, you have the power of darkness at work. And when we get this light working, it puts us in a position where we can receive forgiveness for sins and the inheritance among those that are sanctified. God has an inheritance of nations. Do you know that? Nations have a glory. Nations have a glory that's about to be revealed. We're in a time of an outpouring where God's going to pour his spirit out on all flesh. And rulers and governments are going to have to wrestle with issues regarding Christians. And it's coming down to you. You may think it's out there, but it's all coming down to your freedom to have an opinion and your freedom to do what you're called to do. So let me just say this. The Spirit of the Lord is raising up a people who are going to be strong and who are going to be able to stand. We're having a meeting at the Trump Hotel, and it's going to be coming up in August. And it's going to be a special Washington, D.C. dream trip. We're going to be talking about the dream God has for the nations and for America. We're going to be mobilizing together. We're going to have to do it ourselves. Like I said, the religious establishment is all embarrassed by controversy. It's going to have to be grassroots believers doing it. So go to lancewallnau.com/dream trip. lancewallnau.com/dream trip. My goal is to help you get clear on the calling, the assignment, the blueprint that you have for your own success. I believe that when you succeed, the nation gets strong. I believe that when you occupy your territory, we can resist darkness. I believe every one of you has a place in the battle in the nation. And we're going to have to mobilize our own media response teams. And I'm meeting with believers right now, and it should have been done a year ago. We need our own powerful rapid response media center so that Christians can understand not only what's really going on, get a biblical perspective, debunk and demystify what the mind control is putting over the masses, and pray in the power of Jesus' name for America to be saved, for the president to have peace of mind. And we need now more than ever before the Daniels and the Josephs and the wisdom. We need persuaders that are going to be able to persuade powerfully, irrefutably. And that's the call that God's got on us right now. We need voices that are speaking truth, because the enemy's got a great big megaphone, and most Christians are not informed enough to be able to know what to believe. And I'm sorry to say, as they call me today from Washington, oh, the optics don't look good. Ooh, they're worried about the optics. Well, let's change the lenses. Let's get heaven's perspective. And let's get baptized in the Holy Ghost. And what happened when they got baptized in the Spirit? They had tongues of fire. And it's not just so that you can go walk into Walmart and try to get a word of knowledge, go minister to somebody in the shopping line. I'm all for the supernatural. I get a bad rap sometimes. People say I'm not into revival. I'm totally into revival. But right now, America is in desperate need of a reformation. It's a reformation. That's what we have. We don't need more believers falling down on the floor in ecstasy. We need more believers getting on their feet and running for office. Does that make sense? I'm just calling it like it is, people. And I'm sorry I'm so intense today. It's just the subject matter gets me upset. I was in a good mood until I saw what the liberals did today. America was on track last night. Kim Jong-un, nuclear North Korea. Got Dennis Rodman over there working things out. You tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor. Dennis Rodman. If I wrote a script 10 years ago and said, I'm going to take the communist dictator with a nuclear weapon and I'm going to have him be best friends with Dennis Rodman. Maybe a Kardashian. Oh, Rodman's good. And Donald Trump, with The Apprentice, will make him president. You couldn't have written that script. And I believe that even though I'm a little agitated right now, I say, ha, ha, ha. I want you to like and share this broadcast. We're going to find some fun in this eventually. I will find the fun because I think humor is the fastest way to deal with the spirit of the enemy, because the devil hates, liberals hate being made fun of, and they are hilarious, frankly. So like this broadcast, share this broadcast. Why? Because I can't trust the algorithms on Facebook and Twitter to promote it. My gosh, I'm fighting them every day. They're trying to obscure me, make me, lose my voice. But you guys are going to help me with this. We're going to like and share it. Share this with your friends, because I do believe what I'm saying is the absolute truth. Let me put my professorial glasses back on and say, God bless you today. Happy Father's Day. The Father's doing something. Woo! The Father's doing something right now, and he's shaking up the nations. Don't lose heart. Don't lose focus. We're going to bounce back. Within 3 days, I believe you're going to start to see a shift in the atmosphere, because we're going to start to pray for the narrative to shift. And I'll tell you what the narrative is going to be. The corruption in the party and the intelligence community is about to be revealed at a whole new level. Keep your eye on the real story the devil is trying to distract you from. Corruption in the intelligence community is about to be exposed. That's why the Democrats are trying to get you, look over here, look over here. They're scared that they've got an issue now, because this is something they've found that people resonate with the immigration policies. Let's get it together, and we're going to. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.